good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us. Um, my name is Luana Gomez. I work at Growth Acceleration Partners. I'm here to introduce this very first edition of Growth Acceleration Partners AI Talks. Today's session will be the AI Transformation webinar, Is SaaS Dying? How to Stay Relevant and Resilient in a Changing Industry. Again, thank you so much for joining us. This will be a 45-minute session. We will have time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please drop it in the chat. I'm also excited to share that we will be raffling off Beats headphones and AirTags to webinar attendees. So luckily, you will be hearing from us. And now it is time for me to introduce the moderator of the session, which happens to be GAP's outstanding VP of Developer Marketing and Business Development, Didi Walsh.
Thank you, Loa, and welcome everyone. Again, my name is Didi Walsh, and I do head up developer marketing at Gap. If you're not familiar with Gap, we're a consulting and technology solutions company, and we provide custom software, data engineering, and AI modernization solutions. So today we have kind of a provocative title for our session, Is SaaS Dying? So that's a question that we've been hearing in boardrooms and product meetings ever since. I don't know how many of you heard Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, who he predicted that traditional business applications might collapse under the weight of AI agents. So when I think about that, is it really about death? Or is it about something hopefully much more interesting and exciting, which is a transformation or a reinvention? So over the next 45 minutes, our goal is to move past the BS and the headlines and kind of get more real about how AI is reshaping how we build, how we sell and deliver. Am I on mute? Can everybody? You can hear me? Okay. Is reshaping. So, how is AI reshaping how we build and sell and we deliver value with software, which is pretty much what most of us are about. So today we promise that we're going to deliver concrete examples of AI in action and practical ways to get started and a good look at kind of what to avoid, because that's a big one too. So you should leave here with ideas you can act on right away. So to help us do that, we have a terrific panel of leaders who are navigating these questions every day. So first, I'd like to introduce David Dixon. Until recently, David was the SVP for Sage AI. So David, welcome. And could you intro yourself and add a few words on why this topic is so critical right now?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, I used to run the AI division at Sage. For those that don't know Sage, it's an accounting and HR and software company, and really sort of grew the team from quite small to 50 all the way through to 70 odd of AI practitioners. Now I'm on my own. I'm going to build my own venture, and I can't go into too many details there, but I'm very excited about it. But to answer your question, why is this such a pivotal moment, and why the provocative term of why is SaaS dying? I just think we see transformations on all fronts. How we deliver software, how we build software, how our expectations on what software should deliver. I mean, with every transformation, you see more sort of cascading effects. I don't think we know exactly where it's going to go, but I think the one thing that we're concerned of is things are going to change. So I'm very excited to explore what's going to change with the panelists here.
Thank you, David. So next we have Varun Shrimal. Varun is the Senior Director of AI Products at C3 AI. Varun, welcome, and please intro yourself and tell us why this conversation is so important for SaaS leaders.
Yeah, awesome. By the way, let me just check. You guys can hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Didi, thanks for introducing me there. I'll do a quick background of myself. My name is Varun. I've been in the SaaS and AI industry for around about 15 years now of my career. I spent the first 10 or so years of my career for working for SaaS organizations, uh, mainly companies within the product lifecycle management, operations, and point of sale space. And more recently, over the past 5 years, I've had the pleasure of working at AI companies like Scale AI and currently at C3 AI. The reason why this conversation is so exciting to me is because I've firsthand seen how large enterprises have transitioned from a mindset of being descriptive to a mindset of being prescriptive and predictive. And the way in which that they're using the same applications is so different today as it was before. So really excited to be in this conversation and speak with the rest of you about the nuances that I'm seeing, at least from my lens, within the industry. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you, Varun. And rounding out our panel is Chris Featherstone. And Chris is the Senior Director of Product and Program Management for AI and Data within Salesforce's private equity practice. So Chris, welcome, and tell us about yourself and what's top of mind for you.
Well, I appreciate it, and hopefully you guys can hear me okay and it's clear. I think what's interesting about being at Salesforce is we're right in the heart and soul of some of these topics that we're going to be talking about and teasing, centered around what this looks like from the perspective of the evolution of what a SaaS company needs to become in the future in order to be relevant, right? It's really what it boils down to. The other key aspect that's, I think, interesting as well as in a lot of these, when we start talking about the evolution of these perspectives coming from, the big, we'll say the bigger SaaS platforms is where these projects have actually been enabled within an organization, right? And so when you think about that, it's generally in a gatekeeping IT type of perspective. However, that has to absolutely 100% change. And I hope we get into more of the perspectives. And I think this is where David was going around making this a focus of product, not project, and what that looks like in terms of quick iterations. And IT still has a huge, huge role and a pivotal role, but now it's ops, not what it was before, where it was owning everything from soup to nuts. And so that ops perspective is super critical, especially when you're in the product iteration lifecycle of quick fix, quick fix, quick fix, delivery, and then we utilize them to actually keep the lights on and make sure everything's up and running, right? So it's fun because it is evolving quickly, and organizations who get it will be relevant. Organizations who don't won't, and there will be a lot of really cool income, like young companies that will become incumbents quickly and fill those voids.
Yeah.
So hopefully a fun conversation.
For sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That is absolutely, that's a great insight. Thank you all. So let's start with the big question from our title. David, let's start with you. You have a unique perspective, having just left a senior role at a major SaaS player, Sage. So tell us, is SaaS dying or is it being reborn? And how has the definition, getting kind of to what Chris said, how has the definition of a great SaaS product changed in the last 18 months?
Yeah, I think that is SaaS dying is SaaS dead? Definitely not. Is SaaS dying and changing? I think so for sure. I think that, and I think we sometimes get a little bit overexcited in terms of with transitions to say that it's dead, like the desktop products are dead, but they still sit around. So when the cloud came in, so it's not like it's going to completely run out of legs. But I think that when you think about any technology shift, the internet was the sort of driver of the SaaS model. All of a sudden software could be delivered as over the web or over the internet, and your subscription came through with it, and that created that technology shift created that SaaS model and that business model opportunity. I think that the reality is that we will see a business model shift with these new technologies that come about. Whether that's an agent-based model, whether you pay per agent or you pay per consumption or you whatever, I don't know. exactly where it's going to land, but I think that various companies are trying different techniques to see where that lands. So I think that what's really important is as you're a SaaS provider, if you're a software provider, thinking about how the business and the model will change. But that's not even touching the technical aspects of it. I mean, it's going to go through the full life cycle of it, from, like I said, how we build software. Our engineers are changing and using more AI tools like Cursor or Copilot or whatever to build their products. The expectations on how the software sort of evolves with the user and is personalized has changed. I think that, and just how much work you can get done with a smaller number of people has radically shifted the dynamics. And you see that with big enterprises changing the makeup of their company. So I don't know. That's just me spitballing there on stating that SaaS isn't dead, but there is just going to be those major shifts, and I see it on all fronts. And I like what Chris talked about. I mean, when with the ML ops model, the AI ops model, all these stuff, it's the full life cycle within your products that has to change to actually evolve as a business.
You triggered one question for me, which
Yeah.
is, are there features that were once considered nice to have that are now like basic requirements for customers?
I think definitely in the space that I was with accounting, absolutely. Like, there was a time in accounting where manually entering invoices or receipts was an okay thing to do. Now the expectation is you should be able to take a photo. The AI capability should be able to extract that data and appropriately, tag it into the appropriate account. So the expectations have already shifted of like just sort of hygiene levels. I think so. Yes, the answer to your question is absolutely expectations are changing and changing rapidly. And you almost see it. Like I was talking to a potential customer of mine, and now people's expectation around using just things like ChatGPT have actually changed their expectations on how your software should be delivered because they've got this new way of interacting with software, and they're like, it can do that. Why can't my HR system do that? Why can't my CRM do that? So there's just all these pressure points that are forcing changes in expectations.
Actually, that makes me want to ask Chris, from your
Yeah.
vantage point at Salesforce, working with the PE firms, you see what drives real value. So let me focus on the end user for a second. What are the biggest changes you're seeing in customer expectations, and what do users demand that they didn't ask for a year ago?
It totally depends on the industry they're in, as you can imagine. And so part of that is, um, you know, it's interesting because when you start thinking about it from the perspective too of internal versus external, right? So you have your internal customer, your external customer, and the expectations are wildly different. And most of that boils into, like David said, I didn't know that I didn't know that I could do that. And at the same time, um, if it's an end user consumer perspective, every single one of those people have bias according to the best customer experience that they've had.
Yeah.
So whether that's an Apple perspective or whether that's somebody who can over like an Amazon, like it boggles my mind that depending on the geography that you're in, that more than 2 day shipping is just not acceptable. Do you know what I mean? Like we've classically conditioned ourselves into these first world problems around like, and if you're in like other metros, you get it same day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, and Australia's a little bit longer, and so like US is even to
Yeah.
Australia. So like, no,
Yeah.
Chris, it's a great point that expectations are so. Sorry, go.
No, you're spot on. This is exactly what is forming the expectation and bias of every single product. So if you have a smaller product and you're entering into, and it's a customer facing one, it better do X, Y, Z, PDQ and be right there ready to go, or else it's not going to get used. And it was kind of like the old chatbots, right? That were intent based that nobody wanted to use because it did not fulfill everything because you had too many edge cases that didn't fulfill the intents to get them, completed. And now we're in this world where we see people having just long form conversations with these things because they can do it. Now, the part of this though that is also interesting is people don't know what they don't know. And at the same time, because of that, that causes also a lot of scenarios around really poor processes, really poor governance models, like security is now thrown on its ear. The most secure thing is something nobody can access. So how do we open up that piece so that people can get the right governance model around it and not do, nefarious things or just naive things. And then, also give them what they need to in order to, conduct and fulfill. And then part of this too is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And how many either consumers take that consumer experience and then bring it directly into their organizations,
Right.
right?
That's
Have a hard
yeah,
time.
absolutely. Varun, I want to bring you in on this. So you talk to companies all day who are trying to navigate this shift, I assume. So what are the most common fears, and on the flip side, the biggest expectations you hear from your clients?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest fears for implementing at least AI applications is as I see it, and just to give you a little bit of background here, at C3, we have a number of different domain-specific AI applications that we take to market. Everything from demand forecasting to inventory optimization to production schedule optimization to supply network risk, sourcing optimization. We have a number of different supply chain manufacturing use cases, and traditionally, the kind of companies that are now starting to consider these AI applications are these large manufacturing. In fact, I think across the board, there are about 9 to 10 different industries. But specifically for me, I work a lot with manufacturing, healthcare, supply chain companies. The biggest fear, coming to your question, Didi, the biggest fear that I've seen in really adopting AI application is similar to the point that Chris raised around governance. Is there's this there's this risk and there's this fear of not being able to control the outcome and not being able to control the data, right? So on the first point around outcome, there are all of these supply chain related outcomes that I think companies today are just not ready or equipped to implement or to handle. And around data, we've all heard about situations that have happened with companies like Samsung where they've exposed their data to LLMs and then given away certain IPs and allowing people sitting in back offices around the world conducting all sorts of nefarious activity with them. So you know those are the two biggest risks that I hear on a day in day out basis. Number one is data, number two is outcomes.
Right.
Don't you think, sorry, Didi, I didn't mean to
No,
step over you. I
go.
think that the interesting thing that I find too is there's definitely folks that have, a fear-based perspective. It's either utopian or dystopian. And it's almost like super divided as well around this notion of, hey, I'm in the San Francisco area. Heck yeah, I'm going to jump in a Waymo car and just have it like drive me around. It's an unbelievable experience. And at the same time, you get people that will never trust anything like that because there's this fear and uncertainty and doubt around what it really is. And I think that's the part of it too, is it's our jobs to actually dispel the myths around, like Varun's saying, there is absolutely 100% safe way of doing this. Make sure though, it is important to, have the cliche perspective of having your data readily accessible, but it's also the identity and the access management and the systems and process that get access to that information and what, where, and how, like you're saying, within the governance. And, part of it too is you'll have in some of the dystopian views as well around for every AI practitioner, I need a security person ready to
Right.
go, right? Which
Right.
I think that's overkill.
Right.
At the same time, okay, great. Have a good, healthy dose of what this looks like. In Varun's point on Samsung, I actually got to work with that team that put that data into, OpenAI from the perspective of their dev environments as well as their sensitive documents. And it was super fun to actually go in and say, guys, Thank you for being historical pioneers and showing us what not to do.
Yeah, right. Well,
Right?
yeah, and actually that, let's move from, we've been talking kind of about the what, and let's talk about the how and
Right.
get specific. So we've all talked about kind of, there's there's always a lot of bad we can talk about. Does anybody have a success story, that you can share, a real world example, maybe not get specific, but maybe a client who successfully embedded AI or solved a critical business problem?
I'm happy to
Yeah.
jump. I can jump real quick.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
I alluded to it, at the start, at Sage, this isn't a sexy problem or anything, but getting invoices and receipts into the accounting software, appropriately tagging those transactions with your general ledger, checking for anomalies, whether they're fraudulent or not. These are just foundational AI problems that created real value for our customers. And the amazing thing is when you create that real value, they're willing to pay. So then it becomes a revenue source. It's not just a nice to have feature. It actually becomes a core part of software. And again, I said, I know it's not sexy, but those kind of problems in all our software are around and ready to be solved. So it's a real problem, solved a pain point, generates revenue for the business, win, win, win.
One thing that you said probably a year ago in a blog post, you may not even remember it, David, but it was production or it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that philosophy, especially for AI, where there's a lot of talk.
So, Didi, I'll explain where that came from really quickly. When we first started the division, we knew that AI has this kind of image of being, lab scientists just researching for the sake of research. So we made that sort of cultural value of production, or it didn't happen. We didn't care how good the model was. We didn't care how effective the data flow was. But if the product or the model wasn't in the hands of customers, you could pretend like it didn't exist. And it just created this forcing function of delivery. And I think that any enterprise that goes through a transition where they can sort of, I mean, I think, Chris alluded to San Francisco-based companies are a different breed. More of those enterprise companies that maybe have a different kind of approach, a different kind of development model, really need that push in that direction. So, Didi, that's where that came from.
I love it. I love it. Varun, do you have a success or a failure? Either one. We heard from David. You give us some insight.
Yeah. So one of the areas that I've worked in a lot, and I'm seeing disruption happen at the speed of light in, is within the supply chain, supply and demand execution space. So obviously, any company that makes anything, any company that manufactures anything has this process within their business called S&OP planning, right? Which is sales and operations planning. This is basically the process where the sales team will tell the operations team, this is all the demand that we have available or that we have coming in, and we need you to plan for this demand, right? And this happens in different shades across different industries. Now, the area that and I'm going to talk about this from a success story perspective, the area that I've seen AI disrupt this particular process and this particular product that is used by a lot of these large manufacturing companies is through agentic supply and demand execution. So essentially what companies are doing now, or I'll be specific about C3 and the product that we've had a lot of success taking to market, is we can invoke agents to conduct orchestration of various different frameworks where a demand planner can now come in and just ask the question in natural language around, hey, I'm seeing a certain uncertainty with tariffs, for example. This is just one of the hundreds of line of questions that can take place, but tariffs being top of mind for a lot of us right now. A demand planner might come in and ask the question around, there are about 5 product lines that we import from China, say, and I'm expecting the tariffs to go up by, say, 500% or whatever that number is. Traditionally, what this demand planner would need to do is, go in and change these import duties and tariffs manually within the system, and then manually calculate the impact analysis of this across various different downstream work streams, and see what the network impact is overall. And this could take anywhere between days or weeks to actually come up with an answer of, hey, should I continue importing from China? Or should I import the same sort of raw materials from Mexico, for example, to thereby reduce my cost and improve my overall bottom line across these product lines? Now, what you can do is with agentic orchestration, you can ask the question in natural language, and not only will the agent basically respond back, but it'll conduct multi-hop reasoning behind the scenes to play the scenario of a rise in tariffs across various different product lines for China, say for example, and then also conduct an impact analysis, and then also provide you with mitigation plans. And it could be plan A, plan B, plan C, Mexico, parts of Argentina or parts of India, for example. And you can in minutes see which plan would be ideal based on the uncertainties that your business is facing. So this is an area that I'm seeing a high amount of activity and impact in. And I feel like the future for S&OP planning or supply chain planning is agentic orchestration. I feel like this is going to completely disrupt the space.
Perfect scenario for that. I mean, because there's so much data there. That's awesome. Thank you. Well, so Chris, I thought it was interesting that you talked about Samsung and, can you talk about the red flags that, because like we've heard Varun and David, which I love that because that gives so much insight into what people should be doing. Can you talk about the red flags people should watch out for when building these projects and any takeaways for our audience to also identify a failing project too?
Yeah, it's a good question. And they're hard. They're hard to find, right? So when you think about it, back before we had, a lot of the guardrails that are in check today, especially with agents, what we found was there was just a ton of just accuracy issues, coming across the board. Nowadays, most of the time what people will get into trouble in is on the access management side of things. The three hardest pieces of any of these AI projects, whether it be classic pattern recognition AI and or generative, is data access management, and then user experiences. And where do we put those, right? And so what we find today is that one, it'll get too locked down or not locked down enough, just like classic access management issues. And then, so I want to go and maybe I've indexed all the documents within my organization and stuff. And now I'm looking at my CEO salary. That's an easy one, right? At the same time, just putting in those policies and procedures in place and knowing which
right.
Policies apply to the same things that we do today. And now how do we actually apply those, across, agentic models and utilizing it now? Because by and large, our agents today have to mimic some of the personnel roles that we have, that are going out and gathering all this information, right? It's pretty simple and straightforward. At the same time, it's just making sure that we have, that governance goes through our processes. And I think that's the part of it that we often that doesn't get, as much, light is, yeah, exactly. Is our process broken? Are we mapping technology to a broken, process? Meaning, is it, doesn't mean that it's broken in terms of providing business value, but is it the most efficient way of doing it? When we do private equity, as you can imagine, it's all, I want efficiency, I want cost takeout, and I want to understand how I'm actually going to maximize this across people, systems, and processes. A lot of times they default right to, well, let's get rid of the people. That's not necessarily the best scenario. What is it in terms of, is our process broken? Do we need to reevaluate that? And then let's look and make sure that we have the data to supplement that. And also relevancy is in life cycle is important. And then what does that look like in terms of influencing people? You can replace people, don't get me wrong. And we've had a number of customers that have gone through and did better call deflection and replaced 30 some odd people and or repurposed them for more high value activities, things like that.
Yeah, that's
So
fantastic, because those are the areas that are kind of dull and easy to skip.
exactly.
Yeah. So this is where the rubber meets the road for our audience, because, most people are wondering where to even begin. And you often hear of a crawl, walk, run approach to AI adoption. So let's make that concrete. So, David, I want to start with you. Let's talk about leveling up. When you were at Sage, moving from, say, walk to run with, I watched your video about Sage Copilot. What had to change? Did you have to change team structure, skill set?
Yeah. So this is a really good question. I think first and foremost, we had to make sure we had executive buy-in. Like we had to make sure that this is wanted from within the whole organization. It can't just be a little nice to have in the corner. So that buy-in was absolute pivotal. Second core requirement is like, and Chris and Varun talked about, we need to make sure the data was accessible. If we don't have it in an appropriate place, we can do our work. And there were literally times where we would say to security and say, okay, well, if we can't use the data, we can all just go home now. So you have to have that kind of tough discussion about being able to sort of get that unblocked. And so then once you have the skills, you have the buy-in, you have the data in place, really just pick off a high value feature that you could embed in your software to get going. Get that first win. A win is more important than the home run. You need that first win. Then as you evolve and you're actually starting to embed AI in your software, or maybe you build an AI product, then you shift to a different metric, and that's revenue. It's like, okay, how much money am I actually making from this thing? I don't want to just have nice to have sitting anywhere. So I could go on and on about this sort of evolution and transformation, but to summarize my advice is get moving and get a win embedded in your product, and that's a great first step.
Which, by the way, we always talk about bias being negative. It can be super positive too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
Yes.
I think of all these smaller companies, Varun, especially like yours, where you have to have the perspective of, we're small, but we are the best. Smaller, I should say, right? In terms of, but we are the best, and we are the best at X, Y, and Z. You have to have that perspective of nobody will believe and buy your products, right? And so I think we get into that, but I think, it goes honestly back to a cliche, understanding the problem, why versus what, and starting with the problem that you're trying to solve. And some people don't know that they don't know, right?
Right.
That's it, Chris. That's such a good point. That whatever you choose, make sure it's a real pain point and a real problem that your customers need. Otherwise, there will be no value, there will be no revenue, there will be nothing.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So Varun, David said something that kind of triggered me. A huge blocker for most companies is data readiness. And I was looking at your background, and your background involves a lot of data connectors, and you're deep in that world. What does good enough data actually look like for, say, a crawl or a walk project? How do you advise clients to avoid the trap of waiting for perfect data versus good
Yeah,
enough?
this is something that we encounter on a regular basis. So essentially, there's no company that I've ever worked with, Didi, has ever been able to say that, yeah, my data is ready, my data is perfect, my data is ready to go. Let's go. Let's start this project. Pretty much every single company that we've ever had as customers has always said, "Oh, we're not really sure about our data. We're not sure it's ready. We don't think it exists in a perfectly correlated state, in a perfectly normalized state in one system." In fact, the state of the enterprise as we know it today is data is, existing in unnormalized, uncorrelated states in disparate systems, and hundreds or even multiple hundreds of systems within large enterprises, right? And the idea isn't really to have this data in a perfectly correlated state. The idea is to develop a consistent view of this data as it sits across large enterprises, across different systems. And the way that this is done in, forward-thinking enterprises that are open to taking the risk, is to essentially establish a data model that can bring in this consistent view of the data across multiple systems. And that's what we're enabling with a lot of our applications at C3. Is what we do is we come in with a digital twin approach where we map out all of your data as it exists and then try and develop a consistent view of it so that it can be made usable, and try to start with data as it exists, not with some glorified version of super clean, completely usable data, which I don't think any organization would ever get to.
Yeah.
Which don't you feel like too, Varun? People don't even know what they have. Is it structured? Is it unstructured? Is it transactional? Is it columnar? Is it, sitting in a data lake? Is it, just slam and cram Hadoop based, that kind of stuff. I don't think they even know, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, especially for the large ones, right? So we work with a lot of, like, in the tens of billions of revenue enterprises, and they're 50, 70, 80,000 employees. You're absolutely right, Chris. Like, what's being used in Australia, for example, is not the same kind of system of data that's being used in America. And you know, developing an understanding of that is not always necessary. Uh, what is, though, is this attitude of wanting to do something with the data that exists in your geography, and wanting to get started. Having this mindset of taking risks and learning, and it's okay to make mistakes as long as they're made in a controlled environment.
Fantastic. That is absolutely. It's funny because I run marketing, so I have so much data, and everything you've said, I'm like, yep, yep. I don't always know what I have, and I never think it's good enough. And anyway, so let's talk about the market. And we're kind of running out of time, but I just wanted to talk about the market for a minute, just because we're flooded with vendors, pitching, oh, ours, everybody's got a revolutionary AI solution. And it can be difficult to separate genuine value from, sales hype. Does anybody, how about if we all give a tip on how to like figure out what are the red flags, or what's what are the questions we should be asking?
Who do you want to have start?
Go ahead. If you
Want me to go? Okay.
Yeah, go.
Everybody will, I think everybody now knows how to spell AI and actually spell agents, right? I would say for just breaking it down for the key, business users in all of this is just focus, like we said, it's cliche, but it works, but focus on the problems, not the technology first. What problems are they trying to solve? And then work backwards. And then, this is why that product versus project perspective comes in, because you need to start small and iterate quickly. So that's why that, doing a product, is like MVP. Then we figure out how to, spike things and get through, through iterations. And if you don't know a guy, I know somebody that can help you. His name is David Dickinson, and he can help you do all this all day long. In fact, he's independent, brilliant guy. He can do this.
Right.
The other piece is, leverage existing tools that are there, and then figure out how to embrace this continuous learning and continuous experimentation type of perspective, because you have to do that in product, and it's pretty straightforward. And then think about, augmenting what you already have as well as automation. Like, what can you augment? What can you actually, utilize what you have there as your already existing investment? Don't run away from all those kind of things, because part of that is, if I focus on the problem, I can work backwards from the other pieces and then just focus. It's a pretty simple and straightforward, but I've seen it time and time again work, because then we get into this perspective of just getting stuff done in most cohesive way. So,
well, and before any of the rest of you answer, One of the questions we got is for SaaS companies with smaller teams or limited data, how can they still compete or innovate with AI without huge resources? So I feel like that kind of goes along with this question. So
100%.
David or Varun, either one of you have some thoughts there?
I'll answer both differently. And I don't know how the others are going to react to this. So this is just my trick with big vendors. Is if when I'm getting sold a product or a vision in a big vendor from a big vendor, fantastic. I love it. But when I really trust them is when they'll share their warts with me. When they'll say, yeah, it's fantastic here, but it doesn't do so good there. So this is just a heuristic. I'm not saying this is not the perfect model. I'm just giving the audience a potential heuristic. That's when I know that's how I build trust because they're being honest with me. Now, how does a smaller SaaS company get going and move quickly? Just use off-the-shelf LLMs for as much of the problems that they can solve. Use those things and get moving. And then into the usability of their product, start capturing data, and maybe they can swap it out with a custom model or whatever they need to do. But there is hopefully whatever they're building, there is space for them to use some of those commodity models to get moving, or whatever C3 offers or whatever Salesforce offers. All those things give you that off the shelf advantage. Varun, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think, David, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You alluded to this, which is strategically thinking through high value use cases before applying AI to them. It is so critical. I think the right use case means it's a big enough problem for the business. It has a tractable AI solution. There's enough data available to tackle the problem with say machine learning models or LLMs. We can achieve the right sort of business results. The results can then drive strong business value. And most importantly, this last step, which is you can embed those results in regular business process flow, right? There's like these series of maybe 5 or 7 things on what makes a right use case for AI, um, which is so important to think through. And a lot of this work needs to happen on the front end as opposed to the back end, because if you've started with the wrong use case, chances are AI can't solve for it, but the result's not worth it, right? It's trying to use a very expensive tool to solve for a problem that's not big enough for the business. So I think
Sorry, guys. Keep going. I was gonna add to it when you're ready. Go, go, go.
I was just wrapping up. I just want to make the point that spending the amount of time upfront in strategically thinking through the right use case is so critical.
I just think that's so well said, and I think that in many ways, sometimes we've got a hammer, we're looking for a nail. Like, look for the problem that you want to solve, and if AI happens to help encourage that solution, then fantastic. But don't just look for AI for the sake of AI. I don't think that's going to find value for your customers or your business or anything. So, Bruno, I was just reiterating your point.
Absolutely. And we're just about out of time. We were only able to answer 1 or 2 questions. But before we wrap, I'd like to ask each of you for one final takeaway. Looking ahead 2 to 3 years, what is the skill or capability or mindset, I kind of want to leave it open, that will separate the winning SaaS companies from the ones that become irrelevant? Why don't we start with Chris?
So this gets really interesting too, because now, you think about it from the people that will win, it seems like ask the best questions, right? Or ask the best prompts or anything like that. So what does that look like in a job interview? We used to do, remember, DD, at Microsoft, we used to do pseudocode exercises, right? On, give me this, help me utilize this array to find this, value in these words and stuff like that. Now it's going to be, hey, here's my outcome. How would you construct a prompt that would actually derive that outcome? And I think it's part of these. I don't think that everybody needs to be a prompt engineer or anything like that, because what we miss out is the context of a lot of this data. And is context more important than a good prompt? It could be debatable, right?
Right.
But I think, 2 to 3 years out, I think part of this is going to be, we're going to start to see folks utilize this, to create businesses of one. and utilize these types of technologies. And I think the groundswell of all of these little these smaller organizations become a long tail to question the status quo, to question big organizations, and big organizations still becoming relevant because of the mountain of data and information.
Did we lose Chris?
Part of this is going to be a lot of really interesting lines of just using the tools and technology to do things in your day-to-day.
Thank you. Varun, do you have a final thought?
Yeah, final thought is, I'm a big believer in applications that are prescriptive in nature, right? So who do I think will win? I think if you look at the history of where SaaS applications came from, is we started noticing this around the turn of the century, around 2000s, where a lot of companies were building these data applications that could be used cross-functionally within the business. And these are the database type applications that companies started subscribing to, right? Just because that cost model just made sense. But where I see this going is companies that are now utilizing this data to make a prediction, to give a business or an enterprise an idea about where they're going, are the companies that will win. The companies that are predictive and prescriptive in nature, not a lagging indicator of performance, which is like, hey, I can look at my ERP and tell you what the sales were for last month. Great, but that doesn't really help me in terms of making a decision for tomorrow, right? So companies that are leading indicators of performance that can look in and say, hey, you're forecasting 20% below your sales rate for next month. Those are the companies that I think will win.
That's excellent. And David, bring us home.
Yeah, I think that if we assume the thesis will be true that our productivity is going to increase with AI across the board and we're going to get more done with less, and that almost generating code becomes not commoditized, but becomes much more efficient, I think that those companies that'll win will be those that are problem focused and set themselves up to work at pace, to move with agility like you've never seen before, because things are going to keep going at pace. And so those that set themselves up effectively, I think will win.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all. That's a powerful way to end. My biggest takeaway is that AI isn't just another feature to add to your pricing page. It's a fundamental shift in how you create and deliver value for your customers. And so it requires a change in mindset and skills and strategy. And so that's all we have time for today. A huge thank you to our panelists, David, Dixon, Varun Shrimal, and Chris Featherstone, for sharing their expertise and their candor with us. And thank you to our audience as well. And a big thank you to our host, Gap, my employer, for bringing us all together for this conversation. So if you're looking for a partner to help you on your AI journey, you can learn more about us at wearegap.com. And I think that we have something to give away. I don't know if Loa is going to come back on or how that's going to work, but
We will share the winners after the winner.
okay, great. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we hope everyone has a great rest of day. And thank you again to our panelists.
Thanks,
Take
Didi.
care.
Appreciate
Thanks,
you hosting.
everyone. Thanks, guys. Thank you, girls.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.